we started with the question, what does it take to basically move from current reality to that emerging future possibility that many of us can feel but don't know how to quite access. And what I have been basically saying is that, number one, what it takes is a process that we described a little bit, and number two, it takes a cultivation of inner conditions that I summarize with these three words: the open mind, the open heart, and the open will. But what we haven't talked about so far is that there are many examples actually, you probably have many examples, we have many examples. So when the new is coming into the world, those are the conditions that we need to cultivate, and we know many examples of that. But at the same time, in the current moment of global disruption, what do we see? We also see an amplification of the exact opposite, which is not the cycle of presencing, but the cycle of absencing. And the cycle of absencing is based on the exact opposite. So it's not the opening of the mind, it's the closed mind or ignorance. It's the closed heart, the greed or de-empathizing, the rigid walls between us and them that we see moving up around us. And then, of course, it's the closed will, it's the fear that makes us holding on to what is, as opposed to opening up to what is wanting to emerge. So instead of moving through this cycle of seeing, sensing, and presencing, we move into exactly the opposite. It's denial instead of seeing, it's desensing instead of sensing, it's de-empathizing. And of course, then it's absencing, which is cutting the vertical connection to my emerging self. And whenever that happens in a community, we do not see this here happening, which is the co-creation of the new, but we see this happening, which is the destruction of others and eventually of ourselves. So that certainly, I don't need to give you many examples. We see this happening around us, not only in the form of fundamentalism. So if you want a definition of fundamentalism, you could just go to this definition here. Systems that operate on a closed mind, a closed heart, and a closed will are systems that usually we refer to as fundamentalist because of the way they interact with people outside of this community. And as we all know, it's not limited to religious community, it's happening across all systems. So that's a little bit what we went through. The two learnings: that it takes a process and it takes these interior conditions. But the last thing I'm leaving you with is that as this opening, this deepening of the social field is actually happening, that's indicated on the lower half, the yellow half of this, we at the same time also see an intensification of this field of absencing that is operating on exactly opposite principles. And in a way, the interesting thing about our time is it's not like us versus them. It's not like I am down here and someone else is some other space. The reality, how I perceive it, is more like, sometimes in my good moments, I'm operating way down here. And, I know many examples of that together with collaborators, with our teams. But then the next moment, before I know it, I am maybe operating from my blind spot, enacting patterns also here. So where unintentionally I participate in creating collective results that no one wants, like the 1.5 we talked about earlier. So if that happens, really leadership means, and my job really as a leader is to become aware of that, to noticing that I'm getting off track, and to move myself back on track, to realign my attention with my intention. And that's I believe, really the leader's work. It's not just kind of good people versus evil people. It's more like the cultivation of this self-navigation capacity that allows us, when we get lost in this blue territory, to bring ourselves back on track. To recap, 3 things. So first, we shared with you the 2 fundamental concepts that underlie the ULAB architecture: the iceberg model of systems thinking and the U model of transformative change. Second, we share with you a little bit what's possible in the context of the rapidly growing ULAB community that could be a resource for you to bring in your own entrepreneurial initiative. And lastly, we would like to invite you to now set your own intention for your continued ULAB journey in case you choose to do so, and also to apply some of the principles that we shared with you over the past 90 or so minutes onto your own situation by a journaling process of which we already took the first step, and will take the remaining steps in the next clip.